Hi, I'm Ben Golke from Developer Relations at Adapty. Today I'll be taking you through a step-by-step guide to set up the Adapty iOS SDK. We're going to start with a starter project where features are complete, but there is no integration yet and no paywall. We're going to install the SDK. We're then going to configure the SDK and then use it to set up a paywall for our user. Let's take a look at the things that you're going to need to follow along. Let's get started by taking a look at the starter project and the other information and resources that you'll need to follow along with the tutorial. So this is our app. It's called Movie Mania. And if we go to the content view and take a look at the preview, we can see that its goal is to show movie posters and other basic data about movies that are recently in theaters and give you an opportunity to scroll through them and then look at their additional information. So if we scroll up and down, we can see that there are various movies in various genres. And if we tap on an individual movie, we go to the movie detail view, which gives us a view of the title, when it was released, and also the poster. If the user taps on the poster, they will then see more information, things like genre and description. All right, the first step in converting the Movie Mania app into one that supports the Adapty SDK is to actually install the SDK into your project. And we're going to do that by using the Swift Package Manager. So you're going to want to go up to Xcode's File menu and choose Add Package Dependencies. And then it will bring up the Package Manager interface. Any packages you've already installed in other projects will be here. In my case, since I've already used the Adapty SDK, it's showing up here in my recently used list. If you don't have that because you've never used the SDK before, all you have to do is go to our GitHub repository, which will be linked in the description of the video, grab the entire URL and paste it into this search bar. And once you do that, the Package Manager interface should find that package and present it to you just like it's doing for me. So we're going to choose the Adapty SDK iOS and hit Add Package. There are several different options that we can choose from. For today, what we're going to add are the Adapty package product, and the Adapty UI package product. So we're going to choose Add to Target, Movie Mania in both cases. That's going to be the name of your app, whatever it happens to be. And so you're going to choose those, and then we're going to say Add Package. And it's going to take those two different packages and add them to our project. You will now see a package dependencies section in your file navigator, and you should see the Adapty SDK down here. I'm using version 3.3.4 because it's the current version. If you're using this at some later time, it may be a different version. That's okay. It's just going to pull the latest one. So once we have the Adapty SDK actually installed into our project, the next step is going to be to set it up to be configured and activated inside of our application. But before we do that, we want to add some constants to our project just to make it easier to find them and to use them. So I'm going to go into the app folder and right click and then say new file from template. I'm going to choose Swift file, and then I'm going to call this constants.swift. And what I'm going to do here is pull in the constant that I've already created. So this is just an app constant structure. It's pretty common, a pretty common sort of pattern that you might see in app development. And it allows you to organize your constants in a really easy way so that you can find them much easier when you're actually typing in the values in usage inside your other parts of your code. So what we've got here is sections for Adapty and placement. We've got the API key, the access level ID, and a particular placement value. We're going to go over these values later in the tutorial, but just wanted to provide this first as a way to store and then access these app constants. Of course, the API key here is going to be whatever your API key is for Adapty. You can find that in your dashboard. All right, the next step is going to be to go into the Movie Mania app main file, and we're going to initialize and then configure and activate the Adapty SDK for use when the app launches. So the next thing we need to do is to import the Adapty framework into this file. Once we have that, then we can go ahead and create a new init function and place in the configuration there. So what we've got here in the init function is first we are building a configuration. So you can see here we're calling Adapty configuration.builder with API key. And then you can see we're actually using the app constants file we just created to easily find that API key. So it's appconstants.adapty.api key. Makes it very readable at the call site. Once we have that configuration, we're then going to go down here and activate the Adapty SDK. So you can see Adapty.activate with, and we're passing in that configuration that we created in the previous step. The Adapty activate function is an asynchronous failable method, so you will need to wrap it in a task and then also await it and put a try in front of it in order to allow it to attempt to do this. And if it fails, you'll need to catch those errors and handle them in some way. So what we've also got in here, we've got two other lines we need to go over. This one is an example where we're going to delegate some responsibility to an additional file. We're going to see that file in just a moment, so I'll come back to this line and we'll explore it again in a minute. And then we also need to activate the Adapty UI framework because we're going to use that to show a paywall inside of our product. So this is not green because we did not import it, so let's go ahead and do that. Once we do that, it should fix that call and show us that it is recognizing that call. So the next step is to create another place where we can store some additional help and other function calls we can make while we're using the Adapty SDK. So to do that, we're going to go into the utilities folder that's already in your starter project, and we're going to create a new class, a new file. So we'll say new file from template, and we're going to use Swift file, and then we're going to call this Adapty helper. You can call it whatever you like. That's what I'm calling mine, just to sort of remind me what it is and what it does. But we need to bring in the code for this, so we're going to insert that. So there's a lot of code here, and we're not going to go over every single line of it, but just to give you an idea, this is an observable object, so it's something that we can pass around and get information from as it changes. And there's a few things in here that we are going to use in the rest of the application. So one big one is the customer profile. There's a class called Adapty profile that allows you to inspect the actual profile data for your user on the Adapty side. So this would be profile data that we generate for you automatically, and then also profile data that you can add yourself if you like. At a bare minimum, there is information in here about access levels. So an access level is just simply a way to signify that functionality has been unlocked for that user, typically after they purchase a subscription or an in-app purchase product. And so in order to inspect the access level and figure out if you should be unlocking that functionality for your user, you need to take a look at the profile. It's a pretty important object. So we've got it here in the helper, and it is a published property. It allows us to see it. You'll see in a moment how we're going to inject that, and we can look at that from anywhere within our application. So over here in app main, we need to create an instance of that Adapty helper and then use it within our project. So we're going to create an observed object here that is of type Adapty helper. We're going to go ahead and initialize it immediately. And this will then be injected into the rest of our view hierarchy so we can use this later on in the application. So now that we have that observed object declared, we want to inject it into our environment. So down here in the body of app main, where we have our window group and our content view, we're already injecting a few items in here, so we're going to go ahead and inject this as well. So we're going to inject that as an environment object, and that will allow it to be seen in the environment and used by other views within the application. Okay, so that's going to be helpful for us later on in the tutorial, but before we get any further with actually displaying the paywall and things like that, we need to make sure that we have refreshed our user's profile, because it could very well be when the application launches that the user has already purchased a subscription or some kind of in-app purchase product. They've already run the app previously and they've done that. So we want to, on every app launch, understand what the current status is of that user's profile. And to do that, we're going to call into the Adapty SDK to refresh that profile. We're going to go ahead and just run that right here on the content view initialization in the body of the app main. That way it runs immediately as soon as the body runs, right as soon as the application launches. So for that, that's just going to be a task that we're going to hang off of the content view. And it has just a simple call in it. We're going to call into the Adapty helper that we just created. And one of those functions is called refresh customer profile. So from there, we're going to grab the new profile from Adapty's SDK and then load it. So let's go ahead and go look at that. You can see up here, it is a main actor function. It's asynchronous and it can throw an error. And simply it just calls into Adapty's get profile function and then stores the result in our customer profile published property, so that way we can access it wherever we like. All right, so at this point we have the everything we need. It's the Adapty SDK has been configured and initialized. We are also setting it up to refresh the profile on launch so that we can make sure we have an up-to-date profile. And the next step is going to be to go into our content view and actually set it up to show a paywall. So the first step here is that we're going to use both the Adapty and Adapty UI frameworks, so we want to go ahead and import those. With those imported, now we need to create an environment object to pull in that injected value that we put into the app main. Okay, so now we've pulled that Adapty helper into the content view and we can use it. Okay, so after we've injected the Adapty helper, we pulled that in from the app main, so we can use it in the content view. We now need to do a little bit of configuration in order to be able to get the paywall data to be able to present it whenever we like. So that's going to happen immediately upon creation of this view. So to do that, we're going to set up a task to pull in that information. So this task here that we've declared at the bottom of our body, it does a couple of things. It calls into the get paywall function of the Adapty SDK. In order to get a paywall, you need a placement ID, and those are things we're going to go over when we get to the section where we're configuring all these things in the Adapty web UI. But for now, just know that anywhere you want to show a paywall, it has to be connected to a placement, which essentially is just a spot within your app where you want to show that paywall. And every placement has a placement ID. So we're actually going to show that here, and we can even convert this from being a literal string to being a string coming from our constants file. So to get the paywall, we just simply call get paywall with placement ID, and it returns the paywall object. It's asynchronous and can fail, so you need to try await it. And then from there, you take the paywall object and you use it to get a paywall configuration. So because we've added this task and we've set it up to actually store a paywall config as a property, we need to go declare that property at the top of our file. So you can see that this is a state property, and it is from the Adapty UI framework, and then it's the type paywall configuration. It is optional because when we launch this content view, we won't have a paywall configuration. We have to run that asynchronous task to go get it. So it is optional, and then it will be filled in once that task runs. All right, so the last step within the context of our code before we jump into the Adapty UI to configure the rest of this is to actually set it up to present a paywall. So to do that, we're going to go here in between the sheet presentation and the task, and we're going to add a way to show the actual paywall once we have the configuration. So there's quite a bit here. Let's go over what this is doing. The first thing that we're doing is we're actually using a custom modifier called iflet. We have iflet, and then we're passing in paywall config. So that is the property that we just set a moment ago in the task, and it is one where once we get the paywall, we can then use it to get the paywall configuration. So we're using this iflet to unwrap that, and if it is unwrapped and it is a real object, it's not just nil, then we're calling this closure, which takes in the view, which is everything above what you see, and then it also passes in the unwrapped paywall config object that definitely is real, it's not nil. And from there, we can then say we want to modify this view to present a paywall. So this call, .paywall, is a modifier you can call on any view, and it will present a paywall using a remotely configured paywall from Paywall Builder inside of Adapty's web UI. It'll present that paywall as a modal on the view that you attach it to. So as you can see in this case, we don't want to do that until we get that config, which is why this whole thing is wrapped up inside what is essentially an unwrapped optional. So from here, we've got a variety of arguments that are passed into the paywall call. So the first thing is pretty standard, just like you'd see in any other modal presentation. We have isPresented, and we then have a state property called isPresentingPaywall. It's just a Boolean, and it indicates whether the paywall is being shown or not. It's passed in as a binding. And then we've got an option where you can set it to full screen or not. So if it's not full screen, it presents as a sheet. And if it is full screen, it'll present as a full screen modal. The next one is paywall configuration. So that's pretty critical. You have to pass in a paywall configuration object, and it can't be optional, right? It has to really be a real object. So that's why, again, this whole thing has to be unwrapped with that paywall config before we can proceed. We pass in that unwrapped paywall config, and then the rest of these are basically just callbacks that are used by the paywall view to indicate back to you in the application what has happened based on the user's interaction with the paywall. So hopefully the optimal outcome is they finished their purchase when they went ahead and converted and purchased some kind of product from you. In that case, did finish purchase will run, and you get two things. You get the product that was purchased, and you also get a purchase result object. It lets you understand essentially, did it work, things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass that off to our Adapty helper and allow the helper to handle the rest of that. Let's jump into the helper and take a look. It is the was purchased function, and all it does is just switches on the result and checks to see if we have success. If we do, one of the things that comes in with that success result is an updated profile. So in this case, a profile from Adapty that shows that that particular product has been purchased, and therefore the access level connected to that purchase has been unlocked. And so we can go ahead and attach that updated profile to our customer profile published property, and then anybody that's observing that will get that updated value. We're not handling any of the other outcomes here. Again, in a real production app, you'd want to go ahead and handle the rest of them. They will show up in here when you go to do code completion on the switch, and you can just handle those values accordingly. The next one beyond did finish purchase would be did fail purchased. In this case, something happened and the purchase just failed for some reason. And you get an error in that case. So you can inspect the error, see what it's doing, perhaps present something to the user, a toast message or another modal view, however you want to do that, but in some way indicate to the user that the purchase failed and then sort of give them an option of how to proceed. So all we're doing in this case is just dismissing the paywall. Again, in a production app, you'd want to do more. And then the other three that you see here, we've got two more that are failure states. One is failing to restore, and the other one is failing to render. And again, in this case, you get errors in those examples, and you can inspect those errors and respond accordingly. In this example project, we're just simply closing the paywall in those cases. The last one being did finish restore. This is just like a did finish purchase, except that the user has chosen to restore a previous purchase rather than make a new one. And in that case, if they do that and it succeeds, that you get an updated profile. And so again, just like the other one, we have a little helper function called was restored inside of our helper type. And if we go look at was restored, we can see it just takes in the profile and then updates the official customer profile that we've got stored here as a published property in the helper. So those are the ways that you want to respond to a remotely configured paywall presentation. And you're going to do it all right here when you present the paywall itself. They're just all basically just callbacks. So we're all done with the actual code changes that need to happen inside of your project. And next up, we're going to go look at the Adapty dashboard and do all the things we need to do to configure our products and configure Adapty itself with paywalls and things to present them. All right, now that we have everything set up in the code, we need to go into the Adapty dashboard and set up the rest of the information so that you can show a paywall. The first thing that we're going to do is talk about the app settings. You'll see them up here in the upper right corner. There are a variety of app settings you need to change or set for your account and also for the specific app that you're talking about. Rather than kind of go into all of those things, we have a great bit of documentation on our website about how to set all that up. In fact, we even have a checklist here that you can follow to find everything you need to set all that up. So I'll put that link in the description, and I would encourage you to check out that checklist. It really makes it really easy to set all that stuff up and not have to, make any guesses. All right, so once you have all that, those app settings configured, the next thing you want to do is think about your access level. So like we talked about before, an access level is simply just a collection of functionality that's connected through some kind of payment. So in most common cases, it's going to be a subscription that your people are going to subscribe to. And then once they do that, you want to unlock some or all of the functionality of your application to give them access to those features. So before we get into products and paywalls and placements, we want to think a little bit about access levels. Do you want to have just one? Do you want to have multiple, depending on how many purchases you have available to the customer inside of the paywalls, how your app is structured, what kind of features you're offering. You want to think about all those things and then figure out whether, if just one will cover you, that's easy. And if you need multiples, you want to think about that and figure out what they need to be before you proceed. So to create an access level, you just click on create access level and go through that process. Automatically, you'll get one called premium. It's just like the default value that is shown for everybody who creates a new product or a new app instance inside of Adapty. In the case of this particular app that we're building, premium works fine. So we'll just go ahead and leave that as is. And now we want to jump into products and connect that access level to one or more products, which will create the connection between them purchasing something and them getting access to that functionality. So we're going to go into the Create Products section in the Products tab, and you can see it has a couple different sections that are required. One of them is access level. That's why we talked about it already, because you have to know what that is before you create the product. So we've decided we want premium to be our access level ID, and so premium it is. The period here, you get to pick from the various periods that are available to the different subscription options that you have on both Google Play and the App Store. This is, for right now, we're just doing an iOS app, so we're going to pick from among the available things there. I've already created those products in App Store Connect, and so I know that I've got a monthly subscription and an annual subscription. So I'm going to go ahead and choose monthly for this one. And then to go over to App Store Connect, I want to look at my two choices here. We also have documentation for how to set this up inside of App Store Connect if you're new to that process. It's not very difficult, but there's a few steps, so I'll link that below as well. We've got two subscriptions here. We've got monthly and annual. I'm just actually going to grab the product ID for the monthly one and copy it, and then we will paste it in when we need to. So product name is going to be, I'm just going to use the same name, right? Monthly, Movie Mania Pro Monthly is what we've called it in App Store Connect. That's what we'll call it in here for consistency's sake. And so we have premium, access level, and then monthly for the period. We're going to hit next. And then now you need to put in the information about the actual ID that comes from the given store we're talking about. So we're going to skip Play Store and Stripe because we're not setting those up today, but you would add those if you had them. So the cool thing here is you can actually have basically sibling subscription options, right? You can have an option in the App Store, an option in the Play Store, even an option through Stripe if you have a web subscription that you can set up, and they can all be analogous to each other. So they can be, let's say, either the same price or a similar price, at least a similar offering, and then you can connect them together within the context of Adapty, so they are considered to be one product inside of our system for reporting and all kinds of stuff. And they're all importantly connected to a single access level. So what that means is if somebody, in theory, if you want to allow this, if someone subscribes on, let's say, Google Play, and they have an iPhone and they also have your app on iOS, you could allow them to unlock that functionality on the iOS version, even though they haven't paid for a specific subscription on that platform. They paid, let's say, in Google Play instead. Through the magic of access levels, you could unlock that functionality for them if you'd like. I'm just going to paste in the product ID, and that comes directly from the store. So that's movie.mania.pro.1m for 1 month. There are a variety of ways that you can sort of structure the ID itself. It is up to you to decide how you want to do that and whatever makes sense for your business. We're going to hit create, and it creates the product. We're not going to add offers to it just to make it simple for now. And you can see here we've got then the information listed in the row. So if we wanted to make another one, we can do that, which we're going to for the annual. So I'm going to check the annual name. It's Movie Mania Pro Annual. We'll use the same name. And then for access ID, again, we only have one, so that's straightforward. And then for this, we want to choose annual as the period. Next, and then we're going to, again, copy the product ID right out of App Store Connect to make it easy, and paste that in, and then hit create. And so now we have two different subscriptions that are connected to the same access level, which means that if the user buys either one of these subscriptions, they will get access to our premium access level, which is going to be unlocking everything in this example. All right, so we now have products. We need to go into paywalls and take those products and add them to a paywall design. So for that, that's straightforward as well. You just go to the paywalls tab and then say create paywall. And the first thing you want to do before you do anything else is add your products, right? Decide what products are going to be featured on this paywall. So we're going to say add product, and it already shows us the ones that we've added. So we're going to say Pro Monthly is available, and then also Pro Annual is available. So we're going to show both of those subscription options on the same page. If we had offers set up already for this, we could choose those. We don't for simplicity's sake, but you can set up offers essentially like discounts and other things to make it more enticing. But for this simple example, we've just got just the plain prices. We need to then give it a paywall name. And so I'm going to just give it sort of like a default name. Standard paywall, right? You might want to use something a little bit more descriptive, especially if you have multiple paywalls that you've designed. It's going to be good to pick something that lets it be differentiated, but in this example, we'll just say standard paywall. Then we're going to say create as draft, just so that it saves that. And now it's in a draft status, which means that it's in progress. We're building it, but it's not actually live anywhere. And now, because we're going to use Paywall Builder, we're going to go over to the second tab, Builder, and we're going to actually build the design of the paywall right here inside of the dashboard. So we're going to say Build No Code Paywall. The very first thing that you get to pick from is a whole bunch of templates. So we've got a huge amount of templates here available to you to start from. It gives you a place to, a bit of design inspiration, some layout options. You can pick from a variety of different choices on how the subscription options look and what the background looks like. And if you even want to have, let's say, video playing, we have a couple of video-based paywalls as well. So if you have a custom video you want to show, you can do that. There's just a whole variety of choices. These are based on a bunch of research that we've done around what paywalls tend to work the best. And so these are a bunch of different template options around the things that we've seen have success in the market. So really any of these that you pick, it's likely going to be, hopefully it'll work for you. And if it doesn't, the magic here is that you can just make another one really easily with a different design and do some testing and figure out what works best for your audience. So we're going to pick one that's fairly simple and straightforward. We're going to choose this one right here. So I'm going to click on it and then say choose. And then it picks that one for me and takes me into the interactive builder for building the paywall. So you can see here that it gives us a whole lot of stuff already, right? Without very much work, we've already got a pretty good looking paywall. Along the left here, you can see that it's the breakdown of the different sections. So there's a hero image, there's an icon at the top there is a header, and as you click on each one, it shows you in the preview which section we're talking about. So very straightforward, very easy to use. And as we scroll down, right, we can get to all different sections and take a look and kind of dive into what's available there. And then you can customize from there. So if you want to change really any of this text, you just click into any section you're talking about. You just change the text right here. You can change the font, the size, the color, how it's aligned, the opacity. You have a lot of margin control, a lot of customization that you can do in here to make it look just like you want to, whether it's a new design that you're creating or you have a brand identity that you're trying to follow. No matter what you're doing, you can easily make this conform to that. So we're going to leave it alone because it works fine for purposes of our example. We just need a paywall to show. But again, you could go through here and customize this to your heart's content. And once you're happy with the design, then all you have to do is just save it. It's going to take you to places where there's data that it needs if there's anything that you've missed. So in this case, there's a privacy policy and also, a terms of service and a privacy policy we need to fill out. So we'll just put in, for purposes of simplicity, we'll just use Google's webpage for this example. But obviously you'd want to put in your TOS and your privacy policy page, wherever it is, and display that. And the reason why is because we show links to those things, in this case, in this design, at the bottom of the paywall. And so when you just tap on those buttons, we want to be able to take them to the location where those are stored so they can see them. So that's important to add those. We're going to hit save. And now it is saved as a draft paywall. And so this is ready to go. We could, of course, further customize it if we like. but this is now ready to be displayed inside of the application. And all we have to do now is just create a placement for it. So we talked about that briefly before. On the left here, placements, we're going to say create placement. And you have to put in two things at a minimum, the placement name and the placement ID. So we're going to just give it a name that makes sense, something that's relevant to you. Just say like paywall after launch as the name, and then on_launch as the placement ID. So this thing right here is actually very important. That is what connects you to the code. So we'll want to make sure that this placement ID matches what we put in the code. And as long as that's the case, then that's how that connection is made between whatever you're doing with your paywalls in the Adapty dashboard and what you've coded into your project itself. The placement ID is how it knows to connect those things together. So we're going to create this placement, and we're going to click on the Run Paywall button right here, and then we get to pick from the paywalls that exist. We just have one in this example, so we're going to choose that. And then we're going to hit Save and Publish. And so that now has published this placement, and you can see up here in the upper right next to the name that it's marked as live, meaning that this is now live in production. And if the app that we're talking about were live in production, it would be displaying this paywall to users as we speak, based on the placement ID. But that also means, even in our test status, that we can now run the application and see this paywall in action in our code, which is what we'll do next. All right, so we're back in the code, and we want to test our paywall now. So if we scroll down in the content view that we've got, we're going to add one more piece of code to this, which is after we get the paywall and we get the paywall configuration, the paywall configuration object, its presence in that optional is what triggers this flet that we talked about before. But we need to trigger the paywall itself by changing the isPresentingPaywall state boolean to true. So after we get the paywall configuration, we know that we're ready to show the paywall. We're going to go ahead and say isPresentingPaywall equals true, and that will both through the optional that we've unwrapped and then the presence of true in this state variable, it will then present the paywall on the screen. So this is designed to show the paywall immediately upon launch. Probably you'll want to do something different, and you can just configure it differently to change this modal, the state value to true, to trigger the modal in some other way. But just for simplicity's sake, we're going to have it launch the paywall immediately. So that's all we had to change, was just setting that state value to true. We're now going to hit play, and it's going to build and run on the simulator over here on the right. And you can see it showed our main interface very briefly, and then now it's showing the modal view of the paywall. And you can see that it matches the paywall design that we created in Paywall Builder. That's because we're using that particular placement ID to get the paywall and its configuration. And so it knows which paywall to show. If we could have dozens or hundreds of paywall designs in our Adapty dashboard, but it would know which one to show based on which paywall is connected to which placement. And so you can see here on the right, we've got the design. It's pretty much just the template design that we saw when we started, but of course you can configure it and customize it as much as you'd like. The one difference here is that it's actually showing the real prices that I set in App Store Connect for this product. So it's $4.99 a month or $40 per year. So you can choose between which one you want, and then you can subscribe. You probably want to do testing on a real device. Generally speaking, in-app purchase testing works better on an actual device as compared to the sim, but once you're here, now you can test it, make sure that it's working, make sure that it's unlocking your functionality properly. You're going to want to keep an eye on that access level and whether it's present in the profile, and if so, which one it is, so you know which functionality to unlock in your application. And with that, we've gone through the whole cycle of installing the Adapty SDK into the project, configuring it to run, and then designing a paywall in Paywall Builder and presenting it here in the app. I hope this has been helpful for you to get up and running. Please feel free to run through this tutorial as many times as you like. And don't forget to check out adapty.io/docs for a deeper dive into everything about the SDK and the rest of our product. Leave a comment down below for other SDK walkthrough guides you'd like to see. And don't forget to subscribe to stay in the know about product updates and other tutorials in the future. Thanks.